So, what are the types in human design? There are 4 or 5, depending on who you're talking to, with the generator category type being split into two. There's what's called a manifestor first and foremost, and that's the first type that we're going to talk about. These are the people that really get things started. These are kind of the leaders, the people that are very confident in their purpose. And they have the willpower and tenacity to bring about change and kind of get things just going, get things started. So manifestors are like the driver getting into the car and turning the key, turns on the ignition, and having kind of a general idea of where they're going, what they want to accomplish. Now, these are going to be the people that can often maybe rub you the wrong way because they're highly opinionated and maybe a little overconfident at times. So there's this balancing act that's needed with manifestors to always know that just because they're confident in their maybe life purpose and who they are as a person, that it's very important to involve other people. And there are going to be times where you do need to rely on your team to help guide you in areas that you're not as suited for. So the manifestors are going to look like they have their throat defined or colored in. So if you look on the chart where the throat's position is on this human's chart, that box, that square is colored in. And so that means that manifestors do have this portion, this center, the throat center, colored in or defined. So that means that that center, they're confident and that they can readily access that part of their personality without any resistance. And the throat center obviously means that you can kind of communicate, that you can share your opinions at will, that you kind of see things in your own kind of personal language. And then the other factor with the manifestor that you'll note on the chart is that the sacral center, which isn't the very bottom square, but it's the one right above it, is going to be undefined or open, which means it's not colored in. So that is the center that really defines the generator group, which is the next group that we're going to talk about. So just to recap, the manifestor will have the throat colored in and the sacral not colored in or open. So when something is open, that means that the person has a harder time accessing that ability and maybe relies on other people to help them along with it. And so that's a great segue into talking about the generator group. So the manifestors, where they kind of make up about 8% of the world's population, is going to be one of the more rare personality types. But the manifestors are quite loud and bold, and so you probably do know at least one in your life, just because they do stand out from the crowd naturally, like a leader. Now, the generators are very important because they make up the most amount of people in the world. Generators and manifesting generators make up about 65% of the world's population. So it's key to really understand what the purpose of a generator is. It's most possible that you do have a generator chart. Doesn't mean that you do, but it's most likely. And the generators are going to have the sacral center, that box we were talking about at the bottom, right above the bottom box, colored in. So the very bottom square is called the root center, and right above that is the sacral center. So just like with the manifestor where it's open or it's undefined, the generators are going to be the opposite. The generators are going to have that area defined, and this is a key component into their kind of personality, their productivity, because generators are the productive members of society. They are basically the workforce at large. These are the people that aren't necessarily having the initial ideas like the manifestors, but they're doing the hard work to accomplish the goals set by the leaders, and so they really kind of have this important factor in getting things done. So if we go back to the car analogy, the manifestor is the one that is sitting in the driver's seat, that turns on the ignition, knows where they want to go, has some idea of what they want to accomplish. The generators are the engine itself, the thing that powers, where the manifestor wants to go. It's able to get the manifestor there. And so they work intrinsically together, just kind of like in a workplace environment. The boss may be the manifestor, and then the generators are going to be the ones that see through the task that the manifestor is handing out. And so they're essential components to getting things done. And the reason why we point out the sacral center and why it's a defining factor of the generators is that the sacral center is kind of your life force. It is your energetic center. And so it's crucial because only generators are able to have their own sense of energy and productivity that's just innately within them. So these are the people that actually don't even need to be told what to do. They just have the natural rhythm that when they wake up, they're going to accomplish things each day. Even on their days off, they probably find it hard to just sit still, to not really engage their mind and their creativity or just doing things inherently. And so they have this kind of stamina, that just kind of keeps them going, like they're like the Energizer battery bunny, whatever thing, is kind of how I see them. And so they're a very key component for society because without them, the world really wouldn't be running. So, but they are going to be the most common type. Now, there are two types within this category. So there's what's called the generator, that has the throat center undefined or open. So it's whited out. So these people aren't necessarily as comfortable with giving their opinions. These are going to be maybe the people that do the work, but don't necessarily have strong points of view. They aren't really as comfortable as speaking up for themselves, or they just would rather be a part of the group consensus. And so they're going to have a harder time maybe expressing their own ideas and opinions and even feelings. But then we go to the manifesting generator, which is again in the generator group. Some people consider them both generators. Some consider the manifesting generator a manifestor. But the key component for distinguishing between the two is the generator doesn't have a defined throat and the manifesting generator does. So, and their throat is going to be connected to one of the motor centers, which are the heart center, the sacral center, the solar center, or the solar plexus, or the root center. So you're going to see this clear line or channel that connects the throat to one of those four centers towards the bottom of the graph. And so the manifesting generator has both the throat and the sacral center closed or defined. And so that means that they're confident with both kind of personality traits or and so they take, that life force, that energy that just keeps them productive with that sacral center, but they also have the ability to express themselves, unlike the generators before. The manifesting generators are going to be those people that the boss maybe calls on, and they have a completely different point of view and aren't very scared to express it or to defy the boss's point of view, or they're just going to be opinionated people. But it's kind of a hybrid of manifesting and generating, and so these people maybe find it a little easier to walk back and forth to being in a leadership role when need be, but also being just productive and a worker when need be. And so you may have like spurts of energy where you feel like you need to take control. That's pretty common with this type, but more than often you're going to find you're most successful when you kind of take your time and really feel out a lot of the space before you voice your opinions and things. And so manifesting generators are very important nevertheless, and just like generators, they make up the majority of the population. Okay, so those are the first three types, first two if you consider generators together, and we're going to talk about a very different type now. It's called the projector type. Now this type in human design does not have a throat center defined and does not have a sacral center defined. So those two components that were essential for the manifestors and the generators are not defined here. So this is a much different kind of a person. Projectors are a little more common than manifestors, but the projectors, what they do is they are really good at being coaches. They're really good at encouraging primarily manifestor types, the leaders. They're really good at encouraging them, helping them see what they need to see, but they're not necessarily the people that are going to be doing the work. They don't have that readily available amount of energy that the generators do. And so projectors are going to be a lot less productive. Not obviously that they can't work, but they need a lot more time in between working, and they'll find themselves better suited for jobs where not a lot of demands are put on them, and that they have their own ability to rest when need be. So if that's like working from home, just working in a much more relaxed environment, they'll be more attuned to. So they're not the types that can really accomplish a lot in one day. And the projectors, you'll most likely notice, will have a lot of rest in between. So these may be kind of the people that need to nap a lot, or they just maybe don't participate socially as much because they might find that a lot more draining than the average person. So the gift of the projector, though, is one, obviously, that they're kind of the coaches. They encourage people when need be, especially manifestors. If you think about the manifestor being the star quarterback or something, the projector would be the coach. And so they chime in when they need to amp up his energy or, make them feel a certain way. And so that's when the projector is at their best. They're not necessarily performing the stuff in the spotlight, but more so on the sidelines. And so the projector... Yeah, so that's pretty much that type. You'll notice all of these things are colored or not colored based on, your personal chart. And so no two charts look alike, but just the distinguishing factors that we've talked about so far is that you really just need to look at the sacral center and the throat center to really understand what type you're dealing with. And that's kind of the easiest way to go about it. And the rest is a little more personal. So we're going to talk about the centers more in depth in the next episode. But before we do that, we are going to look at the last type. Now, this type is the most rare, making up only 1% of the population. So it's probably possible that you don't personally know a reflector in your life. But the reflectors do serve an important part of society nevertheless. Reflectors are the easiest to see when you look at a chart because there is nothing colored in. So it's all white or it's all open or undefined. Now what that means is when a center is not colored in or defined, that means that the person really struggles to use that center or ability, that they more so rely on other people to bring that to the table. And so for a reflector, having nothing defined seems like it would be really scary, but they do have innate gifts that are essential for society. One being that they are kind of like our historians to some degree. Reflector, if you just think about the word itself, is reflecting on what's already happened. So these people do best when they're in roles where they are looking back in time, or they're just looking back, even days or hours or moments ago. They don't really live in the present. So these people cannot really think on their feet, or they do so well reacting to things in the moment. They're much more suited for giving feedback post event, So, like a common, I feel like maybe job would be like a food inspector, somebody that comes in, has necessary feedback and opinions, but comes in and reflects on the state of things. So they're, kind of showing you what could be working better and what is working good. So they're kind of making this checklist of what does and doesn't work. And so that's kind of how the reflector mind is. It's very analytical, and you'll find that these people kind of have like a really vast store of information, that they're very knowledgeable about particular subjects, and they can kind of go at lengths on them when they need to. So these people are very essential. They're just not as common. And reflectors, what's really important to note is that energetically, since they don't have any defined centers, that can make them very susceptible for more defined people to kind of maybe like push over them, like they're, maybe bullied a little bit, or they just don't feel like they're really respected as much because they don't have maybe as much innate confidence within them, because they're not living really in the present as much. And so, this doesn't mean that they're walking zombies or anything, but they, they're just not meant to be reactive in the moment kind of people like the majority of us are. And so it's important to know when you're dealing with a reflector, and to be very respectful of their energy and trying to not kind of project your own energy onto them, because they are very susceptible to that. When they walk into an environment, they can really read the room, but they also don't know how to separate themselves from the energy around them. So it's very important for them to learn, like at a young age, of how to kind of put up defenses. If you think of maybe an empath, I feel like that's a very common kind of trait for a reflector, very empathic energy. So those are the types in human design. They're all, essential components in making society work. And, what Ra Uru Hu really is setting out to do when he came up with this was just kind of working in alignment with your quote unquote design, so you can find like a sense of ease with doing things that are more innately your personality or your way of doing it. You'll find less friction and more success. And so understanding your human design is essential in being successful, and and just kind of knowing yourself a little more intimately. So these are the types.